Welcome to At Your Service, the service management podcast on the CRM Audio Network, with your hosts, Business Solutions MVPs, Sarah Jelinek, Scott LaFonte, and Sean Tabor. Resco is a leading provider of mobile solutions for Dynamics 365. Resco Mobile CRM is an invaluable tool for the field service engineer working in field service for Dynamics 365. Other solutions from Resco include Route Planner, which combines geographic and calendar data, even taking into account variables such as traffic and weather, to ensure that your field agents plan the optimal route possible to their work sites. Resco also offers inspections, which allows you to create, assign, complete, and evaluate field inspections with ease. Inspections enables you to shape every step of your inspection process. For more information on these solutions, or to request a demo for any of their offerings, visit www.resco.net. We thank Resco for sponsoring this episode of At Your Service. Welcome to another episode of At Your Service, the service management podcast on the CRM Audio Network. As always, I am Sean Tabor, your host, and with me today is the Dynamics 365 diva, Sarah Jelinek. How are you doing, Sarah?
I am fabulous, Sean. How about yourself, sir?
You know, I'd be doing better if our cohort was on time, but he's not. Mr. LaFonte is on his way, and yeah, I'm calling him out on the podcast.
Yeah.
Some of us have been here waiting, prepping, doing their due diligence. But
I even got here super early because I was so excited to be with you guys today. And,
as well you should.
I think I got the better half of the two. So with you being here, I think we're good.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we got some cool stuff to talk about today. We got a little bit. I think you're bringing us a little bit of a mailbag. Some questions from the field, which is cool. We're going to talk a little bit about USD 4.0, and we're going to talk a little bit about an accelerator for USD that our friend Neil Parkhurst has created. That's pretty cool. So before we jump into that, just got a message from Mr. LaFonte. He's rebooting his machine. So before we get into that, any interesting tidbits from any of your current implementations you've been dealing with?
So I have been I've been working with a lot of different potential implementations, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of scoping things out, and a couple of them were involving field service. And I'm like, hey, this is great because we've got two really great field service experts, and then there's me. But as we're planning these things through and we're diving more into field service, I've got a couple of questions that have come up with some of our consultants that are starting to learn it and starting to get acclimated with it. They ran into some questions, and I thought, you know what? As a trainer, I always say there's no silly question, and if you ask it, someone else more than likely has the same question. So I thought, hey, you know what? Let's bring it to the podcast, and let our experts ask it. So you can claim total glory on this because Scott's late. So there we go. So one of the questions that we got was when we're configuring the mobile client that we apply appropriate roles to individuals, so it kind of controls their level of access and what they can do in the mobile client. We did that in our initial configuration. But once we deploy it, and obviously we have some changeover and turnover within the organization, we start to apply that to other users. Does it automatically just apply? Do we need to do anything special, like republish anything or do any magic to make sure that they have access, or does it just work?
Well, typically, as long as you have the appropriate field service security role, which there are 4, as long as you have the appropriate role defined as in terms of what they can access within the app, you should be fine. There are 4 roles, like I said. There's field service administrator, there's field service dispatcher, field service inventory purchase, and field service resource. So obviously each of those roles come with different things that they can access. So as long as you're assigning them one of those 4 roles, they should be fine within the mobile app. But they have to have at least one of those roles.
Awesome. Great. So hopefully that'll obviously help my consultants that are working there, and obviously just anyone else that might find it helpful. So one of the things that field service tells us, just in the name, it's being in the field. You're out there working, and you're not at your computer most of the time. You might be, um, out working somewhere. You've got your mobile device, and sometimes you just need to get work done, and that
Mm-hmm.
involves where you start looking at, creating work orders and doing scheduling. How flexible or how helpful is a mobile app for that functionality?
So now, when you're talking about scheduling, are you talking about the dispatcher using the mobile app to schedule and to derive, which work orders need to be scheduled with resources, or are you talking about self-scheduling? There's a big difference.
It could be both. It could be that I'm on site and I realize I need to do a follow up and I want to schedule something for that. Or it might be that, I'm on site maybe checking up someone's work and I need to schedule them to come back and do something later on.
In my experience, the mobile client is not typically well versed for the act of scheduling, right? Um, you can view resources, you can look at different aspects there, but you can't get to the schedule board per se.
Okay.
So I would say for scheduling, you would want to be on the web experience.
Okay. So, I mean, other than just maybe creating a manual booking of just knowing that I'm free this date and time, I can go book myself to do that, but
Right.
not getting to see if I've got any potential conflicts with that.
Yeah, and Scott just joined us.
Yep.
Hey, Scott, we were just talking about some questions that Sarah had from one of her colleagues on field service, and we were talking about field service mobile. Then the question was, can you schedule from field service mobile? And basically, what I was saying is the schedule board isn't really available on field service mobile. It's not really meant for full scheduling. That's typically for the web client, but you can view resources and you can view your calendar and you could view those kind of things, but it's not typically used for full board scheduling.
Yeah, you typically that's correct. I mean, I've seen it and where they'll take a work order and they can assign it to themselves. It's not really recommended per se. I would think, because then it becomes a free for all. But I mean, if you set up the rules properly in terms of what they have access to based on different parameters like service territory or things like that, then potentially they could go ahead and create a booking against the work order, and that could work. It's obviously a lot more cumbersome than just dragging and dropping it on the schedule board or using like a route schedule optimization to go ahead and book it based on parameters. But it's possible.
Awesome.
Right.
It's possible. Yeah.
And also something to keep in mind in terms of scheduling for mobility. Something we talked about on CRM Audio, the mothership, with Dan Gittler, is that with some of the changes coming in unified resource or universal resource scheduling, some of that will be extensible to a Power App, and they're going to provide a sample Power App. It's not going to be the full scheduling like we're talking about here, but think of like when you schedule an oil change with a car, with a car dealership, and you're picking who you want to provide the service, when and where, that kind of thing. Some of that's going to start to be exposed and accessible via Power Apps.
Excellent.
And I think you had a question about invoicing, didn't you?
I did. That was you reading my mind, Sean. Way to go.
Hey, that's what I
So
do.
a question is that obviously I'm out there delivering some type of service for a customer, and some of it might require payment. Not only if I'm providing some type of part or inventory as part of that, but obviously my time is how do you guys work with trying to collect payments, generate an invoice and collect payments while I'm there with the customer?
That's a great question. And back in the day, the mobile app used to have a function that was called Pay Now, and it would launch some sort of payment gateway and things of that nature. I think with a lot of the regulations that now come with the different privacy, protected information, and of course just general, no one wants their credit card information stolen. A lot of what I see now is a couple things. The ability to pay by check and then they can take a picture of it and attach it, or provide some sort of receipt to the customer, and it can get emailed to them. The other thing that we see a lot now is the little the little square readers that they can hook up to the phone. That can allow them to, if it's set up properly, you can put that in there and generate and collect payment that way. A lot of the other ways, I mean, you can do it, but then you need, like I said, you need to get a payment gateway set up. And then if you have any information that's stored in Dynamics, then it's got to be encrypted, and it just becomes it can become a logistics nightmare, and it'll take a lot of time to implement. So I mean, that's typically the way I go about it now with Dynamics is, either accept some sort of cash, or send them an invoice and they can pay online, or a square reader or something like that.
Awesome.
And just for reference, when you said back in the day, you were talking about Field 1.
Yeah,
right.
Back in the sorry.
So no, that's okay. It's just I knew what you were talking about, but some folks listening may have thought that they took the feature away from Dynamics
and
365 for
that's
Field
what
Service
I
Mobile.
initially thought, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
How mean.
No, they didn't take it away. That was the old place.
No, and you can still, if you are savvy enough and can get to the commands, which are not too hard in Woodford, you can find the Pay Now function. It's a shell, right? So it's not actually collecting payment, but would I think I even have it in one of my demo environments where it's like, hey, pay now. And it's like, okay, great. If I click it, it doesn't really do much for me, but
would using it be supported or no?
It is not supported anymore. No.
Okay.
Just want to throw that out there. For sure.
Yep. Nope, that's a good point. So you could do it, but it is not. It is no longer supported, and that's why some of the other options, such as either accepting the check or using the square reader, would highly be preferred.
Okay, excellent.
And then you can generate agreement invoices from actions taken in mobile, and then with the connector they have defined between customer engagement and finance and operations, you can then synchronize those agreement invoices across to F&O if you're using F&O as your ERP system.
Yep. And if not, you have to find some way of connecting it otherwise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
The other thing you could do is, and it's similar to, I think, what Sean and I have been doing within the mobile app and go into a Power App. I mean, you could have a button that says, in theory, accept payment or pay now, and it takes you, as long as you have an internet connection, it takes you to, maybe you have some sort of website where you can accept payments, and you could in theory pull some of that data from the work order potentially to that payment site, or even, like, for example, the invoice, pull in that invoice data and say, here you go, and have them pay, or however they pay.
Okay.
So you could do that as well.
Awesome. Well, some great information for our resources. And of course, as you mentioned, anyone out there that will find this helpful. So thank you, guys.
And if anybody listening has questions like these, you could always reach out to us at voice@crm.audio, or you can reach out to us on Twitter, and we'll put our links in the show notes. But those are great questions. Always good to interact and get some questions answered there. Well,
and I'd be curious to see what other scenarios people have come up with to accept payment, because I know that is in the mobile world, in terms of field service, and it's a pretty big ask. And I know a lot of companies now are going towards more of a, hey, give us your credit card information and we'll do a pre-authorization to make sure the funds are there.
Right.
That's a lot of what happens now as well. If you look at something like the home warranty industry, well, you provide your credit card up front through their payment gateway. They authorize it. And once the work is done, you pay your copay or premium or whatever, and then everything else. So there's a whole lot of different scenarios, but I'd be really curious to see if anyone else has come up with other scenarios that are pretty creative and making things work from a mobile perspective.
There you go. That's a call to action if I've ever heard it.
Absolutely.
I'm throwing down the gauntlet.
Good man. Comes in late, but then brings the noise.
That's
right.
Good
man.
We sort of forgive you yet, so that's good.
That's good.
Well, she does. He knows that.
Yeah, I know you.
He knows it's going to take a lot longer. But
I said sort of.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You did.
Kind of, sort of.
So we got some other big stuff happening this week. Well, recently, anyways, since our last episode. We just had Unified Service Desk 4.0 released. Scott and I are engaged in a project right now where we're implementing USD, and I believe we're implementing 3.3. Since it's only been a couple months since 3.3 came out, we're not jumping right to 4.0.
Same here. Yep.
Let's jump in.
Yeah, no, I think our PM would have an aneurysm, fall to the floor, so we won't put him through that. But there's some really cool features coming in USD 4.0. Sarah, have you gotten a chance to take a look at the new version?
I just installed it the other day to do a quick demo, and I like what I've seen so far. I haven't dived into some of the other functionality, like especially working with unified interface, but I'm very excited to start working with that more instead of just using the classic web interface inside Unified Service Desk.
So there's one feature in particular that since we didn't go to 4.0, realizing that it's there now, it's causing me a bit of consternation, and I don't know whether or not I should say, okay, we got to try 4.0 because of this feature or not. And
now I'm intrigued.
That's the Unified Interface Migration Assistant.
Oh, yes.
That's a big deal because right now we're going through updating all the interactive experience, quote unquote, forms for unified interface for USD to get it to work, right? So that's where a lot of our work is happening right now in some of our cycles. But with the Unified Interface Migration Assistant, it helps you migrate it from your USD configurations from web client to the Unified Interface app. So,
yeah.
So,
no,
I might have to install it in my own environment and then try to do this migration to see how it goes. But I mean, it helps with the run XRM commands as web resources so that you can import it as a solution and deploy on the Unified Interface app, which is pretty big. The events and actions that are supported in the web client are migrated to the corresponding events and actions in Unified Interface. So I'm really wondering if this migration assistant avoids code being written, because I haven't deployed it, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I literally just installed it the other day, so I'm excited, and like you, I'll probably install it on an instance and just try it and see, what all of that entails. But
dun, dun, dun.
So here's the one thing I was noticing, obviously, as I was building this for a demo, and I was closing it, and it seems so minor.
Yeah.
But the fact that it says, "Hey, you just click the close button." It's not, obviously I'm not quoting it verbatim here, but you just click the close button. Are you sure you want to close USD? You may have made a mistake.
Right.
Yes or no. That could get annoying after a while, but I've had so many situations where end users are just like, "Oh, I'm going to close this window," thinking it's just the session or something, and they close all of USD, and they lose. I mean, autosave is on, luckily for some of them. Some don't have autosave turned on, so then they start crying. But yeah, it's a small feature, but it makes a huge difference for an end user.
Yeah, and and especially if you're new to Unified Service Desk, right? And you just started deploying it, I'm sure more often than not, you're going to hit that button.
Yep. I'm
sorry, Scott. You were going to say something. I talked over you. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's it's kind of like that double-edged sword, Sarah. Right? So
right.
You get annoyed. You don't get annoyed you get annoyed that you close it by accident. There was no prompt, and then now we have the prompt, and it's like, what can you do? I guess the only thing you could do is maybe if there was a feature where you could turn off that function, but better to be safe than sorry.
Right. Yeah, when you're constantly reloading your configuration because you're making changes and you want to test it out again, that does get a little annoying. But pretty soon it'll just be like, it's like many of the dialogues that we see that pop up will just go, yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the message said, but I just clicked OK just to get it out of my face. So.
Yeah. And something else that came up from another client is the concept of USD latency. Okay, so typically in your experience, Sarah, because I think you've implemented USD more than Scott and I have, what is typically an acceptable load time for screens within USD? Because your standard web application
Mm-hmm.
historically has been 3 to 5 seconds
Right.
is the standard. But if you're not getting that, what would you expect for
Well,
USD?
I mean, I might expect a few more seconds simply because I might be doing two things at once. I'm trying to load the host of control that's hosting, that page that I'm trying to load, which hopefully should be loading at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there could be some moments of latency depending upon how you're using the system. Do you have a lot of sessions open? Do you have do you have a lot of navigation rules that the system's trying to go through? It comes down to like that best practices analyzer, which kind of gives you guidance, right? To
Right.
say, you might have overconfigured this, you may have overdone it. Here are our guidelines where we see performance as best. But for us, I think it's just a few more seconds than that. If that, when we see some of the pretty same performance that we would see in the web client while we're waiting for that classic interface to load. Now for unified interface, I'd love to do some kind of speed tests on that in terms of seeing components load and how quickly I can get in there and start working after I've clicked a command to open up a case, for example.
Well, and I think some of this has to do with I'm making assumptions right now, so if I'm wrong, everyone out in the internet, forgive me. But when you're loading other systems within Windows, your connectivity to those systems for the overall screen load is going to impact USD.
Absolutely.
So really, when we're calculating form load, I think a strong definition of what components are in that form load, getting an inventory. I like to think of this as a best practice, that when you're defining form load and measuring latency and response time, you have to define, okay, I expect these elements to be done in this amount of time. These other elements can be in this other amount of time, rather than saying the whole screen has to load within a certain amount of time.
Right.
But that's just
I agree with you. And when you, like, let's say you are starting a session, right? Do you really need everything to load at once? Are you going to use, like, if you've got different line of business applications, is it a guarantee that you're going to need every single one of those open
right
the first time you open that record? If I create a case for a contact, if I'm looking at a contact, do I need everything there? So that's the balance that you have to make with the system of going, do you really need this right now? How often do you use it?
Right.
Because you're putting a lot on the system. Your bandwidth of not accessing just a CRM site but others makes a huge difference.
Well, and I think that's a good point you make, Sarah, in terms of, I mean, not even just USD, but anything we're really implementing, right? I mean, looking at it from a business function, are we doing this to the majority, or is it just those handful of complicated scenarios where you have to have all of these, forms loaded or windows and panes loaded for USD or anything else, really?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it comes down to us that implement and know the system and have seen a lot of things over the years to really make those recommendations. But I mean, that is a really good point. And I think it's a fine line, right? Because when we talk about performance, it's usually never one thing. It's like a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
You do one thing, it causes another problem, it causes another problem, it causes another one. So,
well, and USD is a client application, so we also have to take into account the PC that it's being loaded on too. So it's one of those rare situations where you have to actually look at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Most PCs and workstations are going to be up to snuff for a web app, but since it's still a client app, you still have to take that into account.
Right. And make sure that, we always recommend always use the 64-bit version of USD. You're going to get better performance
Right.
with that, but not all workstations have that capability. So,
absolutely.
Now, have you seen anything else? I mean, Sarah, from a USD perspective, obviously, I always tell customers, and I use this for my own, the more memory you can afford to put into your laptop or desktop, the better. But are you seeing something where, anything below this one, even if it's, Microsoft always has the minimum recommendation, right? And we know that's the bare bones. But is there a recommendation that you've seen over the years that says, hey, if I were doing this for my company, this is what I would recommend?
That's a good question, Scott. I'm trying to think of just the minimums and actually the recommendations. And I know with the recommendations that they give you've got recommended requirements and minimum. You want to almost treat your recommended like they are the minimums and try to go above and beyond. I know we had a client that they were taking a while to go through their hardware refresh. They were on 32-bit versions of, I think, Windows 7 or something along those lines, and then they eventually went to Windows 10, 64-bit processors, everything. So, we're starting to see better performance there. But you're right. I think it's the memory that is usually what kind of caps out for us. If all these different browser sessions open. And I think, I think we talked about this as a feature for the October release, that USD is going to start running on Edge and not on IE anymore. I think that's going to be a big help to it as well. Is, do we use the, internal WPF, or do we use IE process for running our hosted controls? That we know that there's a performance difference when you use IE process. It's a better performance. So it's just kind of those, keeping on that hardware refresh and trying to go with the latest and greatest if you can, or if not, just exceeding those recommended. But I can't think of a level of memory. I've got a machine that's got 8 gigs of RAM, and I've got another that has 16, and I don't see a huge difference there. But it all depends on the other applications you're using at the same time.
Awesome. Now I do want to throw something out there, so because you did talk about USD and Edge, and I am pretty excited about that because, of course, we know that the newer browsers are much better in terms of performance and page loads and things like that. Ben Vollmer, do you hear that for field service mobile development? Edge, Chrome, let's go. No more IE, no more Silverlight.
Oh, goodness sakes, no more Silverlight, that's for sure.
No arguments here.
So, for those folks listening to the podcast who are getting ready to deploy USD or maybe haven't done it before, one of the big things that you run into is just the configuration and how to do it for the first time, right? So one of our MVP friends, Neil Parkhurst, created actually an accelerator, and he called it USD Accelerator. And it's a free tool that he has on his site, and we'll put a link in the show notes. But basically, I think this is a great tool for people new to USD to get an idea of what can be done using a template approach. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the end-all be-all tool for all USD deployments, but it will definitely give you an insight to how to construct or configure that USD deployment if you've never done it before, right? It gives you some guidance, some best practices from Neil's experience, and he's one of the best when it comes to USD. So some of the things that it gives you is it's going to give you a template so that you can deliver a demo, a POC, or he says even a production system quicker, but for right now, I would probably stick with the demo or POC. And it also is going to give resources on your team that, again, maybe have never worked with USD, a little bit more information to get started. So if you get a chance, check out the link in the show notes, and it's a pretty cool tool that he's offering up for free to the community. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I can speak to experiences like that. I've not had a chance to download his accelerator, but I'm excited to see it just because they're, like you say, sometimes you start with a clean slate with USD. And I find myself many times going, I know I've done something like this before. How did I do that? Or maybe I wasn't the one that did it. Maybe someone else did. it's just great to have an environment to go look at and see how they can get part of it done. And then usually I can figure out the rest. So it's just a matter of, the knowledge of USD is getting out there. People are giving more examples and more articles of how things work. Neil's a great contributor to the community for that. He's just absolutely awesome. But sometimes you can't find that right away. Sometimes you just need an environment to look at, an example, and then you can say, oh, okay, now I just need to put maybe a JavaScript in here, run XRM, grab some values, do this, do that, and boom, I've got it done.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Neil, for putting that out there. I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah. And, I think that rounds out our episode today. And this is normally when I would kick it over to Agnes for our Resco update. But you know what? Agnes isn't around this week.
What? That's blasphemy.
Well,
I am shocked.
It's for good reason. Agnes got married.
Ah.
Congratulations, Agnes.
Yay!
Congratulations. So this week from our sponsor at Resco.net is Andrew, and he's going to be talking about their Fine Support Organization, which I think Scott and I can both attest. They are tremendous and one of the best support experiences I've personally ever had. So
yeah, they're super responsive. I have told Ivan at Resco, bar none besides them and Microsoft, my two favorite, but these guys are fast. They get back to you. They're quick. Love them.
And the nice thing is they don't come at you with, the basic stuff like, did you reboot? Did you do, you know what I mean? It's they come back to you with out of the box thinking to really get your situation resolved quickly. So I think if we're all set from the at your service side, I think we'll kick it over to Andrew at Resco to talk a little bit about support.
Big shoes, Andrew. Big shoes.
Take it away, Andrew.
Hi, this is Andrew Lorraine from Resco.net. I'm filling in for my colleague Agnes, who is out on holiday for a very good reason. She just got married, so we wanted to send her our congratulations, and I'm stepping in this week for our Resco Corner on the podcast. Today's topic is support. So providing customer support is essential for any company which provides its own technology and services. It's no different here at Resco.net. Since we want you, our partners and customers, to use our technology and services, we also need to make sure that you know what to do and how to solve any potential issue. Support is ready to provide a helping hand if you want to achieve a specific customization. When it comes to troubleshooting or when you're ready to solve any problems you may be dealing with, the following information may come in handy. If you experience any problem with the Woodford or mobile CRM application, each app creates its own logging file. A log is the basic means of communication between the app and a technician or the other responsible person. It provides basic information about the app's behavior, potential faults, errors. The log itself does not contain any CRM data except for the organization ID and user ID that synchronizes the app, as well as the name and ID of the record that experienced an issue. This is all for identification purposes. To speed up the troubleshooting process, it is important to provide us with the log, together with a brief or detailed description of the problem, depending on what the problem is, and ideally with steps to reproduce the issue. Since each part of the solution makes a log, it is also important to mention that the log needs to be sent from the app where the issue or error occurred. Sending a log from Woodford is simple. Just go to the log section, select the latest log, and use the send button, or use the send all button, to send us the error. The logs have been sent to us correctly if there is no further message received by the user. From the mobile CRM app, logs are sent from the About section. By default, when a user wants to send a log from the app's About section, the mobile CRM at resco.net email address is predefined. But if you want to receive logs at your own support email address, the address can actually be changed in the project's branding section in Woodford. This allows your internal support to provide first-level support to your organization's users, such as when there is an incorrect CRM URL or user credentials, as it is faster and more efficient, as Resco doesn't really know the internal network security settings and workflows. Providing fast support to users is one of the key steps to further boosting the user acceptance of the Resco mobile CRM application. Of course, our support will help with more specific cases whenever you need it. And that's all for this week's Resco Corner of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and please don't hesitate to get in touch at mobilecrm@resco.net if there's anything we can do to help you.
On behalf of myself, Sean Tabor, my co-host Scott LaFonte, and the Dynamics 365 diva Sarah Jelinek, we thank you for listening and subscribing to the podcast. You can reach us at voice@crm.audio. On Twitter, you can follow us, CRM Hobbit for me, for Scott, at FLD Service _Guru, and of course at Dyne365 Diva for Sarah. For more information and content about what we spoke about on this episode and others, visit our blog at atyourservicepod.com. This has been At Your Service on the CRM Audio Network, a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.